This is a tier list for the highest of keys. We're thinking about high keys in mind, guys. All of these specs here are gonna be doing fine in your weekly 20s. Okay, but let's jump into the healers. Everyone wants to see, okay, so these are the DPSers, these are the tanks that are gonna be good. Who's gonna be healing me?
Yeah, all right, so first things first. I do think that this season, at least based on PTR, is going to be the most balanced one, or a season that is gonna be very close to the season one, where you could actually play a lot of classes. It doesn't really feel like there's like one particular outlier. I guess there was one, it was like a disc, but it got nerfed like 2 weeks ago, and it's not really that insane anymore. It is really, really good, but not insane. So to all the healers out there, strap in, guys. Like, it will be fine. You can play literally anything you want, and you'll be fine. Obviously, there is some specs that will be a little bit stronger as usual, but I think you can literally play anything and it'll be fine. So let's just start with disc, I guess, because I've mentioned already. I will definitely put disc either in S or A+, simply because it does really, really good damage, still, even after nerf. It brings PI, and I can definitely see a world where you would probably play at least like one class that's wants PI, like a Boomkin or Mage or something. So that will be even more value. It has really good healing profile versus like predictive damage, and there's actually a lot of fight where you just like need to like ramp or whatever, and then you just smash your bender. It is kind of tanky as well, as long as you're proactive. It's not a spec where you just press defensive after damage. You have to like pre-flash shield, pre-fade, pre-shield, this kind of stuff. Which then again might affect your throughput, because if you compare it to like, let's say like Shadow Priest from previous season, it's literally the same defensives, but as a DPS you don't really get punished that much if you have to spend like 2 globals to survive mechanic. While as a healer in like a heat of fight where you have to like top others as well, it might be a little bit of a big trouble where you have to like spend like flash shield and just shield to even survive, and maybe someone else will die. So I could definitely see a world where this could struggle with that, but in general we have quite a lot of defensives with PS barrier, rapture, and obviously like these passive things with flash heal and fate being on very low cooldown.
Okay.
The struggle of this though is uptime. It's a really big struggle, and I do tend to say that disc is kind of a buyer slash vape class, well, spec, where you don't really want to do anything. You just want to keep smiting, because the way the build works is that you play the Mindbender and you just want it rolling. And by saying that, I mean you just need to do your rotation. You basically become like a 4th DPS where you want to keep smiting, keep pressing literally everything on CD so that you reduce cooldown on Mindbender, because then Mindbender results in more healing throughput and more damage. So like if you want disc to do anything special, like a dispel, I don't know, afflicted, incorporeal, CC or whatever, it just affects your overall throughput and everything. So ideally you want to avoid it. Like if you play with like, I don't know, augmentation evoker, you just want to throw everything on evoker instead of disc, so you can just bring what you do best, which is basically like damage and passive healing through damage. So yeah, this definitely shines on like rod fights with what I said, like the predictive damage, because you just smash bend the kind on CD, and you can't really die, honestly. It's really, really strong, but again, it doesn't really bring interrupt. Preferably, you don't really want to stop, and you only really offer one stop, which is fear, and in some dungeons, that doesn't even work because of undeads. But it is a really good spec, and it kind of fits with the meta classes. You bring stamina, you bring disease dispel, which is kind of needed, and not other specs have it. You bring Mindsoothe, so if you play without Rogue, you can do some really cool skips. So yeah, I would definitely say disc something between S and an A plus.
Okay, I mean,
I don't think it's S worthy.
No,
I do think it's like A plus, but you could build a meta comp around disc, or like you could bring disc easily, and it'll be completely fine.
I mean, I kind of agree a little bit, like from what I've seen as well. Like, I was gonna ask you about, like, is there any potential awkward healing situations where a disc would be like have a hard time, whereas there's other healers that are more reactive to shit going wrong, Whereas like Disc might be a class where, like you said, you need uptime, you need a little bit of planning. But if things goes wrong, Disc struggles to like save the situation. And you have no immunity. Like from my understanding, Holy Paladin is such an easy to survive tank. You're strong against physical damage as well. And you're kind of good all round in like all situations, and you bring insane control, right? Because Shadow Priest had so much good stuff like that you couldn't live without in the dungeons. Like if you didn't have Shadow Priest, you just noticed how many issues you had. Obviously, they nerfed the cooldown on Master Spell. It's a little bit longer now, things like that. But you're still gonna be able to utilize some of the really good utility, like Mind Soothes, Mind Control for potential things. But I would like to add that if you are playing double DH, you can do a lot of cool stuff. You have double True CC. You have actually triple True CC, sorry. You have Sleepwalk as well. And you can do a lot of nice AoE skips utilizing Fear Sigil. Having the Demon Hunter get in combat, everyone walks past, and in any Shadow Mouse, exactly. And you have 2 of those. So you can get around not having the Mind Soothe. But like you said, overall, Disc is a really strong healer. And if you say that it's very punishing for Disc to do any kind of like stuff, like you CCing in Corporal or things like that. That's kind of what you want a healer to be able to do, at least.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's just not ideal. That's why I said it's kind of like a vape spec. It's a little bit like Rdruid. You don't really bring much. You're just there to keep your group alive and do some numbers, right? And Disc feels kind of the same, honestly. Like I don't know, man. I'm just like a passenger, like in the group. And okay, guys, carry me, and I'll be there just doing some damn, yeah.
Okay.
It just feels like it with Disc, honestly. And as you said, with Vengeance being so strong, and with having been really good as well, you don't really need to bring what Disc brings, kind of. So you're like this healer that does good damage, has good like healing profile, brings a lot of DR with like stamina, shields, barrier, and stuff, so you can survive the one-shot mechanics. But at the same time, guys, carry me because I don't really do much.
Okay, so you're just there to heal and do damage. And
much, yeah, that's what this does.
Okay. Okay.
That's what this. That's why I think it's gonna fit into the comp, because you just bring what you kind of need to bring, and everyone else will do their job, right?
Yeah.
And you can just like get away. But there will be struggles. Struggles are definitely like spot healing. It's got buffed, but it's not nearly as strong as on like other classes. You kind of left with like flash shield, some shields. You have to like commit stuff like Rupture, sometimes even barrier to just like out-heal some nasty stuff. Like Waycrest Manor, like the Goliath boss.
Yeah.
It is so hard to out-heal the Thorns on Disc. It is crazy how hard it is in comparison to like, I don't know, Monk or Preservation, because they have so much like spot healing. It's beyond crazy. And there's also fights where you have to just dodge a lot of mechanics, like as an example, Volcal in Etal Desar.
Yeah.
It is a fight where you have to like kind of pump on high keys when the disease comes. And as a Disc, you struggle, especially in P2, because you have to constantly dodge. So you're just gonna lose globals, and then again, it affects your Mindbender CDR and just overall like uptime on Mindbender. So yeah, we just do less healing. So I guess like that's what I've mentioned. It's just the uptime. Disc definitely struggles with that. Like if you can't just stand still, keep casting smites, and do your normal rotation, you'll be like a bit weaker. Yeah.
Okay.
And any affixes where you have to do anything extra is gonna like punish you even more.
Yeah. Bursting still exactly the same. There's been no changes. So Disc is also going to be really good for bursting weeks, obviously. So we can say Disc is really good, has a couple weaknesses, and it doesn't bring any control to the group, really. But one thing I was gonna say about Disc is that if you are ending up playing a Vengeance Demon Hunter, and let's say you have a Boomkin as well in there, then
it's fine. You can get away with it.
You can get away with a Disc because you have so much control. So Disc, really solid healer, doesn't bring so much control, and is weak on spot healing. TLDR.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Big uptime. If you guys want to play a healer spec that is basically a DPS, and you don't want to like do much, you just play Disc, because you kind of have to get carried. Yeah.
And then we have Holy Priest.
I'm not gonna say much about Holy because there's Disc.
Okay.
I just don't see a world where you play Holy instead of Disc in keys, because Disc is just so much better overall. It does more healing, it does more damage. The only thing that Holy is a little bit better at is like pure spot healing. Because like in your alpha window, you just can't die since you have like Serenity basically like non-stop every like, I don't know, 30 CD or whatever. It is less tanky because obviously you don't have Rapture Barrier and you don't have Lenience for extra 3% DR. But at the same time, you could be doing slightly more. Like you don't really care about affixes. It's not an uptime spec. So I guess like if you play in a pack group, it's maybe better to just play Holy, especially in a bit lower keys, because you don't really need that DR and your healing is not as restricted. Let's put it this way. It's also easier to just like get back from a bad situation where people take a lot of random damage, while as a disc, I mean, if you're inside your Mindbender and someone takes a lot of damage and you have to like spread an extra atonement or whatever, again, it just affects you, right? While as a Holy, you don't really care. Like,
Okay.
it's a very, very simple spec. So
And what about the damage of Holy Priest compared to Disc?
damage is actually the damage is actually kind of fine. It's not bad. Obviously, your single target is nearly not as strong as Disc, because Disc is like a king of single target. But your AoE is decent. I would say like on like low count pools with like I don't know 5 to 6 mobs, you can pump quite a lot because of Holy Fire's cleave. Like it feels good. It feels good to play. Like it's not bad. It's just not as strong as Disc. So yeah.
Okay, I would value like healer damage. That single target prior damage is way more important than the AoE. It's definitely gonna speed up the dungeon way more. You can like go into a pool and you can adjust the high HP targets. You know, like you have more boss damage, things like that. Because you're gonna have DPS classes that will automatically kill off the trash while hitting the big HP targets. That's gonna progress you through the dungeon, and having extra AoE is not really gonna help you. So more single target damage, potentially something that buffs your group, like with class buffs or external PIs, things like that. That is gonna be a huge part of your damage. I remember, what was it? The Blessing of Summer was like a really big cooldown for Holy Paladin, especially combined with the Balance Druid in Season 1. It was like pretty much, I think it was top damage, right? If I'm not mistaken. It was like almost crazy.
Almost crazy.
Yeah. So Holy Priest, obviously worse than Disc. Where would you put it? Solid?
I would put it in like B, because it is a solid spec. It is a solid spec, yeah. Like, as I said, all the healers feel good to play, yeah. It's not like you log on Holy Priest and you can just out heal stuff. It's not true. Like, Priest doesn't. I don't like the classes don't really struggle that much as long as you don't play like really high content. So yeah, I would definitely put Priest in like B or something.
Okay.
I don't think it's like a D worth, you know, because you're not gonna end your group by playing Holy. You'll still be able to keep everyone alive.
Okay.
Like most of the situations. So yeah, let's go to Holy Paladin.
No, I want to save Mistweaver and Holy Paladin for last. I want to save because I know people are interested in these, and it's like in cinema, you want to give the best for last.
I see. Get the juice at the
end. Yeah.
I see.
Okay, Preservation Evoker, yes.
Okay, I'm a big fan of Preservation Evoker, okay? I love this spec, and it feels so good to play, chat. It feels so good to play. So basically, Preservation is by far the highest damage healer out there at the moment. You will do the biggest overalls, as long as you play the Nosdomu build, which is basically based around your empowerment spells. It's really strong. You just send your fire breaths basically like every 15 to 20 seconds, depending on your flow state uptime. It does an insane amount of bursts, which helps in some dungeons. Like as an example, Throne of Tides, you know, you have this like dog pool where you have to like blast them as quick as possible. As Preservation, you go into the pack and you do like 500k DPS burst instant, because you love fire breath, trinket, deep breath. It does so much damage. So yeah, definitely highest AoE damage from all the specs. Your single target is also, I would say, good. It's not like nearly as close as Disc is.
The Living Flame spam?
Yeah, it's literally living flame spam. And again, that living flame spam kind of affects your healing as well, because you just spread echoes thanks to your new tier set. So yeah, doing damage kind of helps you with healing.
Okay.
And another thing is you do have a lot of passive healing, which I know sounds kind of weird on Preservation, but you do actually do a lot of passive healing with your fire breath, because of the talent where you just basically do damage based on how much damage fire breath does. So you can kind of funnel healing for Preservation. Like you can pull some mobs on top of the bosses, and if there's like a mechanic early on, you just send fire breath and you lay in a handhold group. It's really strong, and you can do it very often as well because of CDR with TA. So preservation feels really, really good in terms of damage and in terms of like how you can abuse your damage to heal people. When it comes to spot healing, I would say it's probably second best spec at the moment. So as long as it has to be just burst, preservation feels really good because Ved Embrace got buffed a lot. You do play Ancient Flame, and obviously you still play Call of Viscera. So the typical combo of like Ved Embrace into Living Flame normally it does around like 6 to 700k healing if it crits. And that's just 2 GCDs. They're really quick as well because Living Flame with Ancient Flame is really quick cast. So spot healing insane, and it's very important new keys. So yeah, that's definitely really good. The only thing I do think preservation is gonna struggle maybe a little bit with if you play this build is just like pure rot damage coverage. Because it is kind of limited since we don't really play TA with echo spread. And it's a little bit tricky. You just have to like time impairments properly. You need to like base your healing a little bit of RNG because with the new T set, your impairment spells can proc echo with living flames. So if you get good RNG, you're basically a god, you can't die, mana feels good. And then if you don't get good RNG with echoes, you're gonna struggle a little bit because you'll have to invest more essences into manual echoes, and that then further affects your mana because you can't just disintegrate for mana. So rot damage coverage is not like insane as it was. Like, that's what preservation got kind of known for like over the last 2 seasons. But your best is by far the best. Like your AoE burst is just insane on preservation. It actually got nerfed like 2 weeks ago, so that tier set doesn't really spread 5 living flames anymore. It's only 3, but it's still so damn good, guys. It's also so easy. It's beyond easy. You can just send full Dream Breath or like full Sphere Bloom. You can do the old Lifebind ramp where you spread echoes and then you Ved Embrace, and there's so much healing because Ved Embrace got buffed. So yeah, and again, just like spot healing, this season we need a lot of burst AoE healing. There's a lot of like fights, like bosses, and just like normal pools where you need to burst a lot, especially on fortified. It's actually beyond crazy, and that's what Evoker has on very short CD because your empowerment spells get affected by the build, so you can send them every like 20 to 15 seconds, and then on top of that you have really strong CDs like Rewind and just Communion Ramp. So, and obviously stasis, like I don't even want to start talking about stasis, guys. Stasis is nuts. What you can do with stasis this season is actually crazy, because there's a lot of bleeds, there's a lot of like AoE dispels with disease and poison, so you can just like pre-ramp it in stasis and then do like a full clear. So preservation just has everything. Like honestly, I'm logging on preservation, I go into the new keys, and I have everything on the spec. I don't feel like I'm gonna end. The only, let's say, dungeon when it feels kind of meh is at Aldazar, if you have to stay on the stairs, like do the spots, because obviously you have low range, you can't be in melee, so you can't breath. That's the only struggle. But apart from that, I don't know, man. Feels great.
Okay.
Preservation really strong.
I mean, you obviously bring an augmentation evoker already, so you do have the evoker utility. But that being said, obviously, preservation brings it with a little cherry on top, like you said, being able to AoE, bleed the spell, and things like that. In some situations, is really good. You also have good control. Obviously, you don't have the upheaval, but you do have you can spec into deep breaths on and things like that. Where would you put preservation? Would you think that
it's definitely a plus? Like Mike, I know people don't believe in double evoke and stuff,
Yeah.
but let me tell you, preservation feels so strong. It just gives me preservation from season 1 vibes. When it was actually OP. It got nerfed. I know it got nerfed. It's not like as OP as it was, but it's still so damn good, yeah.
Okay.
And we actually played double evoker with augmentation. And honestly, man, when you have double rescue on like 1 minute CD, you can cover whole group with this. So you cannot die to any one-shot mechanic as long as rescue is enough to survive. And on top of that, you have double Zephyr. So like, yeah, okay, you're gonna lose like 1 raid buff because maybe you don't have stamina, maybe you don't have Devo, maybe you don't have monk buffs, but you will not die to things. That's the thing. You will not die with double evoker. It feels really strong.
Yeah. What was the key level? I heard people say that you played preservation evoker in like it was like a 31 key or something. What was it?
Yeah, we did like I think I played like almost every key on like at least 28, 29, and then we did someone like 30, 31.
Yeah.
And we like 2 chested these keys, and I was blasting, dude. I don't know, like it felt so good. Like for example, last boss in Natal, 31 with this item level, you know, like the ad spawn, they just one-shot you. And we literally just rotated personals into double rescue, into personals, into double rescue. You could never die.
And you couldn't
just-
cover that with like pre-shields or something like that in the same way.
Well, in theory you could, but again, it just requires more globals. It affects your performance. You then have to like scaff your rotation, so you lose damage because like with disc you have to save your mindbender, so you can have like proper ramp when the ads spawn. While as a preservation, I don't know, man, just send everything, press W.
And I can imagine that the last boss is very awkward with all the heavy movement of playing disc.
Yes,
yeah,
yes, exactly, because you have to dodge, and that's the thing that Evoker just deals very well with, because you have double hover and you just don't care.
Okay.
It's, I don't know, it feels strong, it is fun to play, it is very good in new dungeons, so I could definitely see a world with just play preservation for the sake of, I don't know, having a good healer in the group.
This is also why I'm generally like pretty skeptical about disc, because normally you wouldn't want a healer that has like weaknesses, because you might struggle in certain dungeons, right? But yeah, I mean, imagine you're gonna go into like a double DH, double Evoker meta.
And Boomkin.
Yeah, and Boomkin is there. My God, that would be so fun. Holy shit.
It's also the thing, it's also probably worth mentioning that, okay, on top of that, Evoker is really tanky. It's actually really, really tanky. You have two walls, you have rescue, you have renewing blades versus rod damage, and you have Zephyr. So it's really hard to die. And on top of that, you can also commit your communion for extra personal, because it gives you 20% health when you press it. So like it is literally impossible to die on it. You're a male class, so physical damage not an issue. And I guess, yeah, I don't know. It just has everything. Honestly, this spec has everything, and this season requires all dispels. I think it's actually the first season in a long time where, I don't know, you just need to bring everything. You need DKs, you need disease dispel, you need poison dispel, and you have a poison dispel as a base on Evoker, and on top of that, you have Cauterizing Flame. So even if you play without disease dispel, you can completely outplay it. It's such a unique thing on preservation, because you can just like pre-ramp your Cauterizing Flame, and you can dispel everything. It is so cool. It is actually so cool.
Then I have a question. Why would you not put preservation in S? What is it that makes you...
It's always sad. Maybe double Evoker is just not good enough, man. Maybe you just need to play something different. Like I just don't think there's one clear winner. I think there's like 3 specs that are like contenders for the best one, but they all feel good in basically all the situations. It's just like, okay, guys, what comp do you want to play? And I'm just gonna fill you in with any of these 3 specs. That's basically my plan for next season. I'm not gonna main anything. I'm just gonna play these like 3-4 specs that are performing really, really well, and then based on like what DPS spec gets tuned down or whatever, I'll just fill in.
Yeah, that's a good point to make as well. Like all of these things that we're talking about right now, guys, they are subject to change. We haven't had the new patch yet. Blizzard will, of course, adjust the numbers a bit if something is overperforming / underperforming, and we might see a completely different, let's see, class representation a month or maybe a couple weeks into the next season. I think people aren't going to start and jump into like high keys immediately. People are going to go in, they're going to get some gear, they're going to do some raids, and then people will like slowly start like pushing keys. So what we see here might be different, but in terms of the healer situation, especially, is that Dana recommends that you don't just put all your eggs in one basket. You can potentially prepare a couple potential classes and then adjust based on tuning later, because it's not sure yet what you're going to end up playing. So we're going to put preservation up here. Would you say, like, if you had to pick one of these two, like right now, would you be more inclined to play disc, or would you be...
That's a base take. That's a base take because I'm not a disc main. That's the best take. Like for me, it's a clear winner. Like I just go for preservation because I know that I will do highest keys on this. Yeah, I just feel so comfortable on the spec. I played it so much, and I pushed on it on like in season 1. So I will definitely go for preservation because it just feels stronger overall. While disc is very good, but I just felt like in some situations I struggled way more than on Evoker. Let's put it this way. And also I really don't like to play a spec that's a vape spec. I want to do something. Like I want to be useful to my group. I don't want to be just there to do damage and healing and nothing else. And that's how disc feels like. I don't know, man. Like
you feel useless, kind of.
Yeah, I feel useless. I don't like to vape. You know, I don't like to vape.
Okay. So if you like to just go in, do damage, and not have any responsibility outside of keeping your group alive and doing damage, this is a good healer. Yeah.
That's pretty much.
If you want to play a healer that has more input into what the group is doing in terms of control and things like that, then Disc is probably not for you. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. Then we got Resto Shaman.
Okay, Resto Shaman. Okay, so I'm probably the biggest Resto Shaman enjoyer. I always try to make it meta.
Okay.
It's actually like second or first spec that I tried on PTR in keys. I played like, I don't know, maybe 10 keys on it, and honestly, guys, it doesn't feel great. But it's kind of like common knowledge at this point.
Yeah.
So let's put it this way. Shaman doesn't really do much. It kind of struggles with healing, and if you want to heal a lot, you have to bend through your mana because of chain heal. And I know it got buffed a little bit, but it's still not nearly close to other healers. So like, I don't think Shaman is in a bad spot per se, but it's just not as good as other specs. And if you wanted to bring something that is like more useful, is stronger, you would play something like Preservation, Disc, Mistweaver, or whatever. While as a Shaman, I'm there, and okay, I can bring a nice kick, but then I don't know, man. That's pretty much it. And also, you don't really do good damage anymore, especially in dungeons where you have to heal a lot, because the more globals you have to spend on healing, you just lose damage, since your damage is not really passive. Like you only have like healing rain rolling and flame shock ticking, and that's pretty much it. And like the whole thing about Shaman was like your active DPS was insane, like your Stormkeeper windows and everything, and it's just not good enough. And on top of that, they just changed Primal Wave, so you can't spread 2 flame shocks go into the pool, which again affects your damage. So it's like, yeah, Shaman is just good overall because it brings like nice mob control. You have DKs, which is needed in Waycrest. You can play Poison, Cleanse Totem, so it helps with some affixes, etc. But like overall, like the numbers are just not there. Like it just doesn't feel great. Like you will struggle feeling a little bit on some fights. Your damage is not insane. You don't really have external. I don't know, man. The spec is just, yeah, it's good. It's okay, yeah, but it's nothing insane. Yeah, like for me, it's like, I don't know, B or C, honestly.
B or C. Okay. Like so if you put it up against Holy Priest, where like do you feel like it's on par with Holy Priest, or do you think it's like worse?
I think Holy Priest can do more damage.
Okay.
But Shaman can probably pump a bit more AoE healing, like pure burst AoE healing. But again, your CDs are very long CD, like AG Ascendance and SLT are really long CD, while as a priest, I guess you have AFO only. So I don't know, man. Honestly, I'd probably like C. Like I would just drop it in C.
Okay.
Yeah. Not a big fan. Not a big fan. I really love Shaman, but this season, again, it just doesn't feel great. And I honestly think it's mostly because of tier set. So like in keys, you need a lot of on-demand healing, burst healing, spot healing. You just want to press like 3-4 GCDs and top everyone. And on Shaman with new tier set, it doesn't feel like it anymore. You have to spread Riptides, you have to spread your force with healing waves, whatever. And it just requires so many globals. It's so clunky and it burns through your mana. I don't know, man. On Preservation, I press 2 GCDs and it's laying hands on whole group. So I mean, compared to like Shaman that has to like spam chain heals here. Nah, man, nah.
I mean,
numbers are just not there.
I can understand that feeling when you jump on one spec and you feel really powerful, and then you jump on another spec and you try really hard to make it work, and it's just you notice all of the issues it has. And sometimes you have to play really well and play really perfect, and then you jump on like a face roll spec that just does everything better and easier, and it just feels way better in dungeons.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's how I feel sometimes as well when I'm testing a lot of DPS specs. And it sounds like that's kind of like the vibes you got here. Like you tried hard to make Resto Shaman work, but it just feels bad.
Yeah. Like guys, trust me. Like if I ever see potential in Shaman, I will be the one going for it. Yeah. I just love the spec. I always try it, but it's basically second season in a row where I just don't think it's good enough. Yeah. I don't know, man. Tier set is dog shit. It's literally tier set. Yeah. Season 1 tier set was really great with the whole chain heal build, where you pumped a lot of burst healing. You played around flow tides. It just felt really, really great. But then season 2, tier set, kind of meh, playing around Riptides. Season 3, again playing around Riptides, which is good in raid, but in keys, it just doesn't go well, honestly, guys.
Okay. Rdruid.
Okay, Rdruid, another vape spec, guys. Another vape spec. So Rdruid is really, really strong, and it brings Mark of the Wild. Okay, its healing is basically infinite versus pure rot damage. It's definitely by far the best heal in terms of that. But I mean, that was like the bread and butter of the spec, and it still is. The biggest struggle on Druid is definitely the fact that you cannot play kick and you only really bring like one stop, because playing a Typhoon is a bit cringe. You just don't have talents for that, honestly.
But you cannot go cat form and skull bash?
Yeah, imagine it. Imagine it. I mean, you could, but again, yeah, I don't think so.
Okay.
So, the changes to Resto Druid going into this season made him way less bursty. So, like, your biggest CD, Flourish, got nerfed by a shit ton. So that's basically going to be your biggest struggle, just like pure burst healing, AoE burst healing on the whole group. It doesn't feel great on Druid, and if you have to do that, it just requires tons of GCDs. You have to pre-spread like literally all your hots, including Rejuve. While last season we could play around just not pressing Rejuve much. It was just like some life blooms, regrowths, wild growth. You press a CD to buff them, and we're good to go. While this season Flourish just doesn't feel great. Obviously, because of that, Convoke also got nerfed, because even if you proc Flourish, it just doesn't feel great. And we don't really play Trank anymore. So we lost a CD, and because of that, like your burst is just not really insane. Like if you need to burst, you have to spend lots of globals, and then again, that affects your damage, blah, blah, blah. It's just like a domino effect.
Okay.
Kind of like this, it is a proactive healer. So any kind of like random damage is not ideal for Druids, because you don't really like start healing till you spend like 2-3 CDs. Only then you start pumping. Defensive wise, nothing really changed. We still have bug and bear form. So as long as you're proactive, you cannot die on Druid. You're only gonna really like maybe a little bit struggle on pure rot fight. Because outside of bug, you don't really go into bear form, so you don't have that much like passive DR. But versus one shots, I just refuse to believe that you ever die on Druid. Like it's literally impossible. But again, it's just like Disc though, because if you have to go into bear form, you have to invest more globals, and therefore your throughput is going to get affected. So it's exactly the same thing with like Fleshly on Disc. Just not ideal. Like you can do it to make yourself survive, but someone else might die to it. So yeah, if you compare it to like, I don't know, Pardon or other healers, you just press defensive, you're good to go. While on this one, you have to invest an extra global, which is just not ideal.
Same problem Boomkin has actually. Like, you know, you have your renewal, you have your Barskin. You can go bear form, press Frenzied Region. Like, I would say Feral Druid feels better that way, because you have some strong instant regrowths, and with Protector of the Pack, you can really self-sustain a lot against rot damage. And you have another strong personal in your 3-minute wall. But Boomkin definitely has that issue as well. If you're against big, massive tank hits and stuff like that, you go bear and you don't even feel it. If you really run into troubles like high keys, you can spec into Ursa and Vigor to get extra HP when you go bear form. Like, you have a lot of ways to survive those massive hits, but rot damage has kind of like always been the weak point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just Druid. Nothing really changed in that regard. In terms of utility, Druid brings quite a lot, I would say, because Vortex is really nice on some pools. You have Poison Dispel, that is basically mandatory at this point. You have Decays as well, so you basically cover like 2 Dispels. You can root on some fights, which helps with like ads, like I don't know, Etal, for example. And I guess you also do quite a lot of damage as long as you don't have to heal much. You can play either melee or range. I would probably suggest to play range, because it feels a bit safer, and you can just like take the range mechanics on you instead of others, which just helps DPS in general. You don't really get affected by that, because Wrath and Starfire got buffed so much that you can easily play Boomkin. It's completely fine. But yeah, like when you have to start healing, your damage just drops a lot, because you don't really do much passive. And I don't know, spec is just like very, very GCD heavy. It feels very good healing wise. When in terms of like rot damage, best not so much. When it comes to spot healing, if it is a predictive spot healing that you have to do, I don't think you'll die with Druid, because you just like pre-hot with Live Loom and someone is good to go. But versus random damage, if someone drops low to like 10% out of nowhere, it will be really hard to recover as a Druid. It's kind of like Disc, but it's maybe even worse.
Okay. But obviously the Mark of the Wild would be really good addition to the group, and also the combat res as well.
Exactly.
And then you wouldn't have to bring the Boomkin, but Boomkin is quite strong. You could argue and say that Boomkin will struggle in some situations defensively, but its output is really good. So obviously you're always looking at the counterpart. Like if a certain spec like tank, healer, DPS is like has a really strong spec for the meta, it will make it harder for the other specialization to come in as well. And right now you have a good like Mark of the Wild with Boomkin that you can bring. It's gonna make it a little bit harder for Rdruid, but like just not looking at Rdruid by itself. If you just brought it in, you could obviously not bring the Boomkin and bring another DPS spec. How good is Rdruid?
I think it is good. I think it's either A or A plus, because you could easily build a team around having Rdruid in to cover Mark of the Wild.
Okay.
And I think if you bring Rdruid, you're probably gonna have like maybe even 2 melees, and that just makes it so much easier to heal. Because I mean, you just like drop Airflow and melee under your tank, and you have like 2 melees in there, and you do like a lot of passive healing with just Live Loom and Verdancy. While if you play like a range heavy comp, your healing gets affected a little bit by it, since you're gonna have like range outside of melee. You kind of want to have Airflow in melee for the tank, so it's like, I guess it's a bit awkward. So yeah, I would definitely like just kind of play Rdruid if Mark of the Wild was needed. But I mean, it's always the same thing. Every season we just try to find this like strongest Druid spec and just play it by default, and it just feels like it is Boomkin at this point. So yeah.
Okay, so you right now like would you put it in A? Because if you put it in A plus, you put it side by side of like preservation and disc. Do you think Druid is up there to that level?
In terms of the keys that you can do with it, I would say so. Yeah. Does it feel as strong as preservation disc? I don't think so.
Okay.
But you could do the same keys easily simply because you have so much healing. You like I do think it is kind of on par with these specs in terms of what you can do with it, like the key level, let's say. Like, I do think so, but it just definitely doesn't feel as strong.
Doesn't feel as strong,
preservation.
and maybe
Like,
it doesn't have as good of a fit into the current meta. So that's why I think it's A, but it's definitely like high on the list. It could very yeah.
I'd say so.
Okay.
Like for me, it is like kind of in between. But if I had a choice, I would play something different as long as I have Bimp in my group. Like
Yeah.
I would definitely be forced to play Rdruid. I would definitely be like really forced. Like I would not want to play it because I know the strongest specs. Like
Okay.
overall.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's how it feel on with Rdruid. And now we get to the juice, Chad.
Holy Paladin. Holy Paladin.
Holy
Sure, there's a lot of Holy Paladin gamers in the chat.
Yeah. Okay, so Holy Paladin, the king of M+. I don't think it's gonna rain that much longer, guys. Go into the season.
Okay.
Okay, so in general, obviously, Holy Paladin got nerfed like billion times again, and I wouldn't be surprised if they nerf it like one more time, whatever, before the patch hits. I honestly wouldn't be surprised, because for me, it's like on Tuesday, Wednesday, I just wake up. First thing I do, I'm looking for next Holy Paladin nerf. It's been like this for past few weeks. I don't know why, but they really want to nerf it. But yeah, let's get to the juice. So Holy Paladin, it is still very tanky in theory, even though Sanctified Plates got nerfed. I do think in new dungeons, though, Paladin is going to struggle a little bit more than other classes on some fights, especially on Tyra, because of the Sanctified Plate nerfs. Since honestly, you only really have one defensive. You have like one defensive, and then you rotate something in between. So you do like wall into maybe AM if it's enough, into wall, into bubble, into wall. If AM is not enough, you just need some external help. Like you need Zephyr, you need rescue, maybe Mash Shield if you play with Mage. And that's what we kind of had last season. Like you just rotated this stuff, like personal into like an AoE stuff, personal into AoE stuff. If it was not enough, you just bubble and you're good to go. Well, this season we might lose Mage, so maybe it's only Zephyr. Sanctified Plates got nerfed. And I do think that you need to press your personal quite often in a lot of dungeons. You have a lot of fights where you have to like press something every like 30 seconds or whatever, otherwise you're dead. And I think Paladin is going to struggle with that a little bit. It feels like it. Like I've played all these keys on like at least 28 on Paladin, and some fights I didn't feel that safe.
Okay.
While on other specs I had like infinite personals. So yeah, defensive wise, Paladin definitely doesn't look as hot as it was, though you're still very tanky versus physical damage. But at the same time, I don't think that there's that much physical damage in new dungeons, guys. There's actually a lot of magic damage, especially on bosses. I can only think of like maybe 2 bosses where there's physical damage that actually matters. Everything else is like pure magic. So you need to have a personal, even on Paladin. Like you won't just like survive it by a default. Though on Trash, there's still a lot of like archer mobs that do like random shoots. So being a Paladin helps on these, I guess, because even if you get targeted, you don't press anything, and even on highest key, you just survive it by default. But on fights on like Tyra, I can definitely see Paladin struggle. Healing wise, I think that's actually the biggest issue. So going to this season, we lost a really strong tier set that helped us with our healing gaps. Since Holy Prism actually just got nerfed, since obviously it doesn't give us holy power, its spot healing is basically like negative. So it still does like a little bit of AoE healing, so it helps to cover gaps in between Divine Soul and Daybreak, but it's not nearly as good as it was last season. So what I'm basically saying is that when you have Daybreak and Divine Soul with Paladin, you're basically chilling, but after that you will struggle. And I guess that's a bit of an issue, because if you compare it to other specs that have like kind of infinite healing almost all the time or every 20-30 seconds, Paladin struggles, like actually struggles, and you're actually forced to do the thing that you really don't like to do on Paladin, which is casting. You do cast a lot, guys. On some fights, you actually cast a shit ton. So enjoy.
Okay. Okay. Paladin not the king.
Not the
And
king anymore.
no
Definitely not the king anymore.
no king rules forever, as they say.
Though it maybe will scale, because obviously we are like 440 on PTR. So I'm only really saying it based on what I've seen on PTR now with this item level. Maybe with max item level will be a little better. I guess we'll see. But as of now, Paladin definitely doesn't feel that strong. I definitely felt like my healing just wasn't good enough for the keys that we did. While on other classes, I didn't really care. I don't know, like I just didn't really care. So yeah, healing not ideal, guys. Definitely not ideal. And I guess I can mention one more thing about your survivability. You do have an external, but you can't really use it on yourself, which again doesn't help. While on other specs that have external, you can always press on yourself and you will never die. Like you can TD yourself, you can bark yourself, you can PS yourself, like you don't care. While as a paladin, yeah, guys, help me. I need something.
Okay. Okay.
In terms of damage, Sama got nerfed big time, so it doesn't really pump anymore.
You have the Boomkin though. It would actually have been a nice lineup.
I know. Even on DH is actually pretty good, because DH does like infinite burst damage.
I guess, yeah.
But like Sama doesn't pump nearly as much as it did pump before, because it got nerfed a lot. Your passive damage is still good, especially like on single target, on fights where you have to heal, because other specs don't really have that luxury of just like pressing buttons non-stop for damage and doing healing. But when it comes to Pali, I don't know, like it's not pumping that much, but I guess one thing that is probably worth mentioning is that you are a melee, and there's 2 trinkets that are really good from Firak. One is a tank trinket that requires you to stay in melee, and that's something that favors Paladin. It helps you a lot to just like cover those defensive gaps, because you can like wall into trinket, and when you press the trinket, you do quite a lot of damage. So I can definitely see a world where Paladin plays that trinket by a default, simply because it makes you more tanky and it just pipes really good numbers. While if you play something like Disc or Preservation, like obviously you don't really want to stay in melee, so playing that trinket is kind of awkward. While on Paladin, really good. There's another trinket from Firak, the Augury one, that requires you to stack a lot of crit, and that's something that Paladin really likes. So again, it helps you a lot with your single target damage. So I guess like in general, Paladin kind of gets carried by just like external power. You know, you have Summer, you have 2 trinkets that are pumping a lot, so that's where your damage is coming from. But your like base damage is, yeah, not that insane.
One thing I'm gonna miss though, not having in my group is Bob. I feel like Bob is such a good cooler.
It is nice, but I just don't feel like it's necessary. Again, I think it's probably because there's not that much physical damage around.
Okay.
Like, there's a lot of bleeds, but that's kind of get covered by like augmentation or maybe preservation. So like, yeah, I mean, it's nice to have it, but I didn't really feel like it's necessary. I felt like it was just like outplayable. While last season it was actually really nice to have it on some fights, like actually really nice. Freedom only really really useful on like one fight. It's in Dark Hat Ticket on second boss, the tree boss, especially after buffs. I don't know if you guys seen it, but that boss is a monster now. So having freedom to clear the yards helps a lot because there's actually a shit ton of them now. So I guess that's nice to have Paladin there. But apart from that, freedom, not a biggie. I mean, yeah, I didn't really find it like that useful.
Okay.
So yeah, but you still bring your utility. I mean, you have Devo, you have insane mob control, melee kick.
Control is crazy.
Control is crazy, and you actually want to do it. Like you don't really get punished by doing that. So like yeah, that's really nice. But again, if you play with Vengeance, Boomkin, and Havoc, you don't really need it. It's there, but you don't need it.
That's true. I just like the like you said. Sometimes, I mean, I think many of mobs, if they are silenced, they will not do any kind of abilities. But
Yeah.
historically, we have had a lot of mobs that has a casting ability that you can lock out on a school, and then has a secondary ability that is not kickable, that needs to be AoE stunned or disoriented or whatever. And Paladin was just like really good in that case, especially because you could play like the short Hodge cooldown as well. If you needed it, something that I remember we played in Vortex Pinnacle, things like Uldaman, like dungeons where single target stops were like a massive thing, where you had to control a lot. Paladin was just like a powerhouse. Like you really felt having the Paladin in the team. But like you said, I think augmentation just needs to carry a little bit more. If you have a Moonkin and a Vengeance Demon Hunter as well, you do have a lot of silent stops to cover for majority of the pull.
Exactly. Yeah. And I guess it's just that like last season it felt more natural because you did, as you said, like a lot of these like single target stops. So having a class that fit in was very nice. But this season just feels like you need to buff the AoE stops, you know. And that's also really nice with Double Evoker. I did not really mention it, but like having 2 oppressing rows with Silent Sigil, guys.
Yeah,
Guys,
true based.
it is impossible to have any cast go through for like 40 seconds. It is so strong. In a Tal Desar, you do like first pull with 10 mobs or whatever, and you just like do back to back, oppressing row into silence, oppressing row into silence, into beam, and then again, silence. It's, I don't know, it's so good. Like, guys, enjoy MDI, yeah? It will be fun.
Okay,
It'll
I
be
mean,
fun.
we'll see what ends up. Like historically, if classes like Moonkin hasn't really been favored in an MDI setting, but I guess we'll see what ends up being the meta. Obviously, this is for high keys. That's like what we're aiming for. Like I think that's what most people care about. Like what is good in M plus dungeons this season, right? I think MDI is a little bit more niche for the people that are competing there. The Holy Paladin, where would you rank?
I would say it's like A. I would say it's like A. Because as I said, it maybe will scale good enough so that you can play it. I would definitely not put it in the same tier as Holy Priest, but again, definitely not as close as Discus Preservation. So yeah, it's definitely still a solid pick, but yeah, just be ready that you might struggle with healing a little bit, especially if you decide to play Paladin as we are used to, which is just by sending Divine Soul and Daybreak for damage. If you do that, you are naked.
Okay.
So you are naked. Outside of these windows, you're just naked.
So you have like strong heals into like really weak heals, kind of.
Pretty much, yeah. That's how it feels like.
Okay.
Yeah. And mana. I guess the last thing is mana. We lost Rashok, which helped us a lot last season, and a lot of talents and just like abilities got nerfed mana-wise, so it's even worse now. So I do think like if you play with Boomkin, it's probably gonna be like okay, but without Boomkin and augmentation, without like Source of Magic, Paladin is just unplayable, guys. It's mana pots or you're dead.
Okay. And then last we have a healer that I've heard a lot of people talk very highly about next season.
Let's go.
And that's Mistweaver.
Right.
What do you think about it?
I'm actually really surprised, but I really like Mistweaver this season. It got buffed so many times, and the latest buff to its single target, I don't know, it made the spec so good, actually so good. So like overall, I do think that Mistweaver has everything. You have insane rot coverage, probably the best out of all the specs now. You have insane spot healing, which is again the best out of all specs. The only thing that you're gonna struggle just a little bit with is AoE burst healing. But again, it is outplayable. Just press defensive properly. Just save your Shaylin, have your Chiji ready, like ancient teachings, blah blah blah. Like it is outplayable. It is not as good as like let's say preservation, but it is still good. Yeah, it is good enough. It's actually good enough.
Okay.
What else? Defensive wise, Mistweaver historically was actually pretty squishy, but I don't think it's a thing anymore because of like two things. First of all, they buffed the talent called bounce back, which allows you to have basically like an on-demand 20 to 40% DR versus like prolonged burst damage. And there's a lot of pools like this, or like bosses. Like let's say third boss in Everbloom, there's like this Archmage lady that does like a fire bolts on random people, and it lasts for like 5 seconds, whatever. On these kind of fights or like these kind of encounters, Mistweaver is basically unkillable because after one tick, you're gonna proc the talent, and for the next like 6 seconds, you're like unkillable because you get either 20 or 40% DR based on your talents. And it can proc every 30 seconds. So I mean, you have it basically on every single AoE. It's so good. On top of that, you still have Damp and Harm, you can spec into Diffuse, we have Thought Brew, and you have Live Cocoon. And I know that people say this is the worst extend on the game, but I hard disagree.
Okay.
Okay, it is only really good for tank. It's only really bad for tanks because it doesn't really provide you with DR. So especially in high keys, Cocoon gets deleted with like 2 melees or whatever. But if you have to extend on a DPS or yourself, Cocoon is actually insane. It's literally like 90% health shields every like what 1 minute something. It's really really strong. It also insta buffs the person with two of your biggest hots, so that if you need to like heal after the cocoon, it's literally impossible to die. It's really really strong. In terms of damage, I would say it's like top 3 at the moment. It can do a lot of AoE damage because you just do a lot of like spinning crane kick.
Yeah.
Single target get buffed a lot, so it's like decent now. And on top of that, we do play two best trinkets, which again are the ones from Firak that I've mentioned when it comes to Holy Paladin. One that again buffs your survivability, which is the tank trinket, and the other one is the Augur one, which just buffs your single target by a lot. And Mistweaver likes crit, so it just scales really well with this trinket. And yeah, you can definitely pump some good numbers. I would say it's like close to preservation if you play very very well. If you don't have to like heal a lot and you just like heal passively with your teachings and Phalanx Stomp. If you like manage to heal passively, you do like preservation numbers or close to preservation numbers. If you have to heal a little bit more, then you're gonna be like around Disc Priest, which is still really high if you compare it to like other classes. So yeah, it's actually really really good.
And
Um,
it feels good when you're playing. Like you
feels
don't
good.
have like any awkward moments. Okay.
I guess there is some awkward moments. If you have to heal a lot, like if you have to do a lot of spot healing and move at the same time, that's
Yeah.
when you're gonna struggle because you actually have to like just stand still and do soothing mist into Vivify spam. And I think the fight where you struggle the most with is actually last boss of Darker Ticket. Because in last phase, there's a lot of poops that you have to dodge. There's people that you have to dodge with the debuff, and the boss does like 2 casts that you have to out heal. And if that overlaps with a poop under you and you have to like dodge and you cannot soothing mist, uh, your healing is just not that great then. So yeah, if you want to do a lot of spot healing, you just have to stand still. But if you don't have to, I don't know, it's really strong. Your passive healing on AoE packs is just nuts. Okay, the more you pull, the more healing you do, and you just can't die. So again, it's kind of like with preservation, where you can do a lot of funnel healing if you pull mobs on top of the boss. Like last boss of Blackrook Hold, you can pull packs before it, so that you have like 20 mobs on top of it, and the boss does like a bolt on someone that chunks people for like 90% of their health. And you can top someone within like 1-2 GCDs because you just spam a spinning crane kick and you top people all the time passively. So it's like really, really strong. Um, yeah, I don't know. It just feels like Spec has everything. And on top of that insane utility, you bring 2 dispels, which are the most important ones. You have Poison Disease. You have really good mob control because by default, you will always have both Ring and Sweep. I think Para is probably going to be a no-go because you need to invest more talents for survivability, but you still have also melee kick if needed. And I don't know, it just feels great, guys. I was really surprised that. Oh, let's just put it this way: Mistweaver really surprised me this season.
Okay. So
It like really surprised me.
would you put that like on par with like disc and preservation?
Oh, 100%, 100%.
Okay.
It's 100%. The only issue of Mistweaver, I think, is that I think the DPS specs that are performing the best now are not really favoring Mistweaver because bringing like physical touch for like Havoc is kind of useless because most of its damage is magic. Same with, I mean, Bloomkin, or if you play Mage. So I do think you lose value out of that a little bit. But there's other specs that are performing really well, which you can play with, like Outlaw, for example. Like having Outlaw and Mistweaver is probably going to be like a go-to if you want to play Outlaw. because I mean you just get huge value out of it, and
100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like really good for that. And when it comes to just like how you help your group, I mean you still have like 8% healing increase, and you have 4% avoidance. So I don't know, unkillable. Honestly, unkillable. It feels great, actually great. It feels as strong as preservation, and with what I can do on the spec in keys. While with this, as we talked, I mean it's great, but it's kind of vape.
Okay. I mean, so TLDR guys, like the healers that currently feels the best in M+ would be Preservation, Disc, and Mistweaver. Disc has a couple weaknesses though. So if you're looking at these 3 healers like up against each other, you feel the best about Preservation. Is that correct?
If I ignore everything else, yes, I do feel better about preservation. Yes.
Okay.
100%.
Okay. And Mistweaver second. What do you say?
Mistweaver, I would say second. Though I do think that Mistweaver just performs really well in like every situation, but it might struggle with burst healing a little bit in like really high keys. While with preservation, it's never going to be an issue. And yeah, I mean, this, we talked about it, right? It's just like high uptime and stuff. You can get cacked by a lot of things. While the other 2 specs, I don't know, man. Yeah.
Okay.
I guess one thing that is also worth mentioning is that preservation and disc already got nerfed. They might get nerfed even more, but I think it's way more likely that they will nerf Mistweaver. Because in my opinion, that spec is just overperforming by a shit ton. Like, I just don't understand why this spec does so much damage and healing. And it's also so tanky. Like, I just don't understand this. It's the first time that Mistweaver is that good. It was good before, but this version of Mistweaver, it just feels OP, honestly.
So yesterday I did the DPS. I invited Dorky in as well for like the tanking thing. You've been doing a lot of keys, obviously. I don't know if you're watching the screen now, but is this kind of like, does this showcase kind of a little bit what you have been seeing from tanks and DPS players? Is this like, would you say this looks to be somewhat accurate, or is there anything you pretty like disagree with? Something that you feel like, oh, I played with this and I felt like you're undervaluing this a little bit.
So obviously, like, I haven't played with like every spec because we actually tried to just like test the best ones, I guess. But like when I'm looking at the S tier, I definitely agree with all of these 3. These 3 specs are just completely cracked. At the moment with this tuning, I just don't see a world where you don't play any of these. They are just, like, Vengeance is so broken, Havoc does so much damage, and obviously Augmentation without the changes, I just don't see a world where you just don't play it. It just gives you like probably 2-3 key levels high or something. I don't know.
100%.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Frost Mage. I haven't seen like any. I don't know, like there just wasn't enough mages. I think I've only played with some like Chinese guys and Flex and boys. Obviously, I've seen you as well. But I feel like people just didn't play mage, so
yeah,
I don't really want to say anything about it much.
Mage is just a really solid class overall, and Frost is just the best performing one in my opinion. It's the one that does the most damage out of the 3. Arcane is it's always an awkward mage spec to play in dungeons. On paper, it does a lot of damage and stuff like that, but it just has a lot of issues with its damage profile. You know, like it has really high burst, but it's also very punishing to do any type of control in your ramp uptime. You have to be melee as well. And it's honestly the mage spec that dies the most out of all of the 3. And I think that's like the punishing factor. And that's why I said I put Frost above, because Frost does like really good damage in dungeons, and it doesn't have that issue. It's kind of similar to like Fire Mage in a way where it's very mobile. And it can easily do DB blast waves like in the middle of its rotation. So it doesn't have the same survivability as Fire Mage, obviously, losing the cauterize and losing like and having a spec that actually goes into haste versatility for its gear. That's why like I put Fire in A, because it's still really solid, but it's the lowest damage of the 3 specs. So if
Don't
they
you think that Fire is maybe gonna scale? Because that's what everyone is saying, that Fire is just gonna scale insanely well with gear, and then Fire will be back.
Yeah, this is based off PTR, right? And you scale to 440 eye level. It could be that with higher item level, that Fire is gonna start like slowly do more and more damage. But like, I'm not sure about the Fire scaling itself, because you do have a lot of fucking haste already. Like
Yeah.
with 447 eye level, you're already running into like 20% DR, and at that point you just go full versatility. So I think they should, if you're gonna see fire like become really good, then they, and I think this is justified. The fire gets a little bit of a DPS increase. I wouldn't be surprised if they got like an hour buff, for example, like fire mage currently.
Yeah, understand. Another thing is like I see Prot Warrior being in B tier, and I definitely disagree with that. I 100% disagree with that. So Warrior is already the strongest tank in Waker's Manor.
Yes.
Like by far. It allows you to, it will probably be brought in the highest keys. And it's just a really, really solid spec in general.
Okay,
Like,
so
it's really strong. You just cannot die. It's an easy spec, very tanky spec. And as long as you play with Evoke that helps you with some bleed dispels, you cannot die on Warrior, I feel like. It is really good.
Okay.
Like, actually really good.
We talked about this especially. We said Warrior was going to be a niche spec that you would bring for specifically Waker's Manor. And there would be no other reason to bring it over Avenging Demon Hunter in any other situation. And Dorky specifically said that it is very weak against, obviously bleeds, but can be outplayed. We also talked about this by having an augmentation evoker, potentially playing Dwarf as well, to mitigate that weakness a bit. I remember in Neltharion Slayer, especially against the Basilisk, this was a problem for warriors to deal with this kind of mechanic. But he said it was very weak against magic damage as well. And he said that there was a lot of magic damage in a lot of the dungeons, which made the Prot Warrior a weaker tank. And that's why we put it in B.
I guess in theory, yeah. But based on what I've seen, like I've played with Kira a lot, and he actually likes Warrior.
Okay.
I did not feel like Warrior was struggling versus magic damage. I could definitely see Brewmaster struggle with everything way more than Warrior was struggling with magic, honestly. I don't know, like the tank is just very solid. It's, I don't know, it's very tanky. It's honestly really, really tanky.
When I saw Robin and Warrior as well, I also felt like that it was pretty good, you know. This was taken from what he thinks. He said B, but I can see why you would disagree, and you'd maybe bump it up a bit.
I'm healing these tanks, yeah. I'm telling you, Warrior is tanky. Warrior is really tanky.
Okay.
I would definitely put it in A at least, honestly. Like, I don't think it's a tier below Blood DK and Brewmaster. I definitely disagree with that.
Okay, you think it's on par? You think it's on par?
It's at least on par, and I mean in like, for example, Waker's, you'll just bring it because it's best, right? So like I don't see a world where it's just below them. But yeah, I mean that's just my opinion based on like what I've seen. And we did actually play a lot of Warrior, Prot Paladin, Vengeance. We did some Brewmaster, especially with Andy. We play Blood DK as well, but I mean Blood DK is just the usual. You can flop anytime. So I guess we'll see with the legendary. But yeah, Prot Warrior definitely felt really strong. Definitely.
Okay. I'd be okay with moving Prot Warrior. I think also like the general thing about tanks is that most tanks seems pretty solid overall, apart from Guardian Druid, which seems to be the weaker tank out of them all by quite a bit, is what people have been saying. Like Guardian Druid was so OP in Season 2, and then it kind of got the treatment, and now it's just in the bin. Any of the DPS specs that you feel like you have seen perform pretty good, that's like low on the list?
I've actually seen Windwalker perform pretty well, but I'm not sure if you would move it higher than B. Like I've seen Dapnel, we played some keys together, and he was actually piping. I guess like the issue with Windwalker is they don't really know like which build they want to play it. Like everyone was like fucking around and just trying different stuff. But like I've seen Windwalker do good numbers, like actually good numbers. And I mean it's still Windwalker, brings long buffs, is really tanky as well. Very good utility. We have like all the dispels in the world that you need, so
exactly. That's why I put it high. That's why I put it high, because Windwalker usually has historically been really good in dungeons with like everything it brings, and it's tanky and everything. It has all the good stuff. It's just been the single target damage department has been really shit.
You could say the same about Red Paladin, right? And Red Paladin's an A. It's exactly the same thing. Like Paladin either goes single target on AoE, and you're gonna struggle with either this or that. It's really the same thing if you think about it.
I thought that the Paladin buff fit better into the comp, which is also why. And I also considered the legendary which might buff two-hand X
I
wearers, and that's why it got an A.
get it.
Because I actually did put it in B, but then I upped it a little bit. But
Yeah, okay, makes sense, I guess.
but red does do, like you said, a lot of damage on AoE, and quite frequently as well, right? Like it's but and red has really good single target damage if you spec into it. But
if you spec into it,
yeah,
that's the thing, you can't redo it in
no.
That is the issue.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, but like everything else kind of seems fine.
Yeah.
I would definitely agree. Like just that warrior thing, but it's in A now, so we're good, I guess.
And then there's also the discussion if the warlocks were sandbagging or something, that we never know.
I don't know that one yet.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll see.
Yeah, the warlock I'm not sure about. You know, like they are maybe putting themselves a little bit lower. Maybe they are actually better than what they say. It's always like that.
I mean, look, Bumpkins were sandbagging and they got buffed. So I guess.
I mean, that was actually just mastery, not scaling with their abilities.
Okay, Bumpkin, man.
Boomkin sucks. Oh, my best stats don't work on my abilities. Never mind, it's good. God, that was pretty much what happened.